The orange sun cast long shadows across the crystalline expanse of Proxima Centauri B, painting the alien landscape in hues of amber and gold. Marcus Vale stood at the edge of a jagged cliff, dressed in a black tactical suit that left his muscled arms exposed. His sharp features and confident stance marked him as unmistakably human, a rarity on this alien-colonized world. "You're going the wrong way again," came a melodic voice laced with playful amusement. "I swear, you humans have the worst sense of direction in the galaxy." Marcus turned to face his guide, Tessa, a striking blue-skinned humanoid with hair as dark as the void, cascading like a waterfall of midnight. Her sleek, form-fitting suit hinted at strength and agility, but Marcus knew from experience that her grace was rivaled only by her lethal skill. "I thought you enjoyed watching me get lost," Marcus replied, a crooked grin tugging at his lips. "Gives you more chances to flaunt your superior navigation skills." Tessa rolled her luminous eyes, a habit she'd picked up from him. "The artifact's energy signature is coming from the eastern ridge. You're heading west, you hopelessly charming idiot." "Maybe I just wanted to admire the view," Marcus said, his gaze lingering on her a fraction longer than it should. 3 months into their partnership, hunting pre-civilization relics for the Galactic Preservation League, Marcus couldn't deny the chemistry between them. But they had kept things strictly professional. Mostly, as they navigated the crystalline plains, Tessa's scanner emitted a series of sharp beeps. "We're close," she said, her voice tinged with that unmistakable excitement she got when they were near a discovery. "The energy signature is strange. I've never seen readings like this before." Rounding a towering crystal spire, they stopped in their tracks. Before them, embedded in a block of pitch-black stone that seemed to devour the sunlight, was a sword. The blade glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat, its surface etched with unfamiliar symbols. "Whoa," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "That's not just any artifact." Tessa's scanner flickered and whirred. "This sword predates even the first colonization wave. Every species that's found it has tried to remove it. Nothing's worked. Not even quantum manipulation tech." Marcus stepped closer, studying the sword's faint pulse as it seemed to react to his presence. "Has anyone tried just pulling it out?" Tessa laughed, her voice echoing against the crystal formations. "Please tell me you're joking. The brightest minds in the galaxy have studied this for centuries, and you think you can—" Before she could finish, Marcus grasped the hilt. The sword erupted with a brilliant blue light, arcs of energy crackling along its length like miniature lightning bolts. The ground trembled, and the air seemed to hum with power. "Marcus!" Tessa's voice was sharp, her usual composure replaced by raw shock. "What are you doing?" "I'm not doing anything," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the surging energy. Yet, with a deliberate pull, he drew the sword from the stone. The blade slid free effortlessly, as if it had been waiting for him all along. The glow intensified, its pulse syncing with Marcus's heartbeat. The symbols along the blade shifted and glimmered, alive with ancient purpose. Tessa's scanner buzzed frantically. "This is impossible," she muttered, her blue skin deepening in color with excitement. "The sword, it's responding to you. It's synchronizing with your biology." Before Marcus could reply, a searing flash of light blinded him. Images flooded his mind. Immense starships bearing the same symbols as the sword, armies of humans wielding weapons capable of bending reality, and the rise and fall of a galaxy-spanning empire, all tied to humanity's forgotten past. "Marcus?" Tessa's voice broke through the visions, grounding him. He realized he was leaning against her, her cool touch anchoring him to the present. "I saw." He began, then froze as a faint whine reached his ears. Tessa's gaze sharpened. "We got company. Planetary security forces. They must have detected the energy surge." Marcus tried to strap the sword to his back, but the blade refused to stay in place, as if it had a mind of its own. "Here," Tessa said, stepping closer than necessary, and adjusting his gear. Her fingers lingered on his chest for a heartbeat too long before she pulled back. "The northern crystal formations emit natural interference. They'll help mask our presence." They moved swiftly through the shimmering terrain, the sword's glow dimming as if it understood the need for stealth. Every step they took felt guided, as if the weapon itself was leading them. During a brief pause in a shadowed alcove, Tessa studied Marcus intently. "You're thinking too loudly," she teased, her voice low. "Want to share what's on your mind? Would you believe me if I told you humans once ruled the stars?" Marcus asked, his tone cautious. Her lips curved into a sly smile. "After watching you pull off the impossible, I'd believe anything." Before Marcus could reply, another vision surged through him. Ancient facilities hidden across the galaxy, dormant yet brimming with untold power. And the sword, his sword, was the key to awakening them. "We need to get off-world," he said, his voice urgent. "This is bigger than an artifact. If the League gets their hands on this—" Tessa's expression turned serious. "My ship's hidden in a ravine 2 kilometers east. Think you can keep up?" "Always," Marcus replied, grabbing her hand as they sprinted through the alien landscape. The crystalline terrain worked to their advantage, masking their movements as they evaded patrols. The sword's glow pulsed faintly, its guidance leading them safely past every obstacle. When they finally reached Tessa's sleek, stealth-ready vessel, Marcus glanced at the sword again. The shifting symbols along its blade seemed to whisper truths he couldn't yet comprehend. "Where to?" Tessa asked from the pilot's seat, her hands moving deftly over the controls. Marcus closed his eyes as another vision overtook him, revealing a storm-shrouded world at the galaxy's edge. "I know a place," he said, opening his eyes. "But you're not going to like it?" She grinned, her mischievous glint returning. "Story of my life, human?" With that, they plunged into the unknown, the sword's glow a constant reminder that their journey was only just beginning. The Crimson Sector lived up to its ominous reputation. Blood-red gas clouds churned like restless oceans, casting eerie shadows across Marcus and Tessa's ship as it navigated the treacherous void. The only illumination came from flashes of distant lightning storms, arcing through the clouds like veins of raw energy. Tessa's hands danced across the ship's console, her expression tight with concentration. "This place is a death trap," she muttered, her melodic voice tinged with frustration. "Pirates, unstable spatial anomalies, plasma storms. And now you're telling me the sword wants us to fly straight into the heart of it." Marcus stood behind her, his hand resting on the back of her chair. "It's not like I planned this," he said, glancing at the glowing sword propped nearby. Its faint blue light pulsed steadily, matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. "I'm just following the visions." Tessa's dark blue hair shimmered in the cockpit's dim light as she shot him a skeptical look over her shoulder. "Visions? Right. Because those always end well in ancient prophecy stories." "Hey," Marcus said with a lopsided grin. "If it makes you feel better, I'm just as freaked out as you are." "It doesn't." A sudden alarm blared, and Marcus stiffened. "What now?" "Patrol ships," Tessa said, her fingers flying over the controls. "Pirates. Looks like they spotted us." Through the viewport, Marcus saw 3 ships emerge from the swirling clouds. They were jagged, mismatched vessels bristling with weapons, their hulls painted with crude insignias. "They don't look friendly," Marcus said. "They're not." Tessa's voice was calm, but her movements were swift and precise. "Strap in, Marcus. This is going to get bumpy." The ship surged forward, engines roaring as Tessa dove into the chaotic storm. Plasma bolts from the pirate ships streaked past them, lighting up the cockpit with flashes of red and white. Marcus gritted his teeth, gripping the armrests of his seat. "You've done this before, right?" Tessa smirked, her confidence cutting through the tension. "Plenty of times. Just never with a mythical sword and a human who thinks he's the chosen one." "Fair point," Marcus muttered. As Tessa weaved through the storm, the sword began to glow brighter. Marcus felt a strange pull, as if the blade was urging him to act. He unbuckled his harness and grabbed the weapon, ignoring Tessa's sharp protest. "What the hell are you doing?" she shouted, narrowly avoiding a plasma blast. "I think the sword wants to help," Marcus said, standing unsteadily as the ship rocked. Before Tessa could argue, Marcus raised the sword. The symbols along its blade flared to life, their glow spreading like a ripple across the cockpit. The ship's systems flickered, then stabilized, and a strange calm seemed to settle over the storm outside. Tessa stared at him, her usually sharp wit replaced by stunned silence. "What did you just do?" "I have no idea," Marcus admitted. The pirate ships hesitated, their movements erratic, as if their pilots were struggling to regain control. Marcus could feel the sword's energy coursing through him, guiding him. Without thinking, he pointed the blade at the lead ship. A beam of pure blue energy shot from the sword, slicing through the storm and striking the pirate vessel. The ship's shields flared, then shattered, and it spun out of control, disappearing into the swirling clouds. The other two ships broke off their attack, retreating into the storm. Marcus lowered the sword, his breathing heavy. The glow dimmed, and the cockpit fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. "Remind me never to underestimate you again," Tessa said, her voice soft but laced with admiration. Marcus sank into his seat, the sword resting across his lap. "Trust me, I didn't know I could do that either." Tessa shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. "This sword of yours keeps getting more interesting." As they approached the coordinates from Marcus's vision, the storm began to thin, revealing a planet below. Its surface was shrouded in perpetual darkness, with flashes of lightning illuminating jagged mountain ranges and deep chasms. Tessa brought the ship into orbit, scanning the planet. "There's a structure down there," she said, her tone cautious. "Massive. Looks ancient." Marcus leaned forward, staring at the display. The structure was barely visible through the storm, but its outline was unmistakable, a colossal fortress carved into the side of a mountain. "That's it," he said. "That's where we need to go." Tessa glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "You sure about this? That place looks like it's been abandoned for centuries. No telling what's waiting for us down there." "I'm sure," Marcus said, gripping the sword. "I don't know how, but I know this is where we'll find answers." Tessa sighed, setting the ship's course. "Fine, but if we run into anything that wants to eat us, you're going first." The ship descended into the storm, buffeted by powerful winds as Tessa guided it toward the fortress. As they landed on a crumbling platform near the entrance, Marcus felt a strange energy in the air. The sword pulsed faintly, its glow cutting through the darkness. "Ready?" Tessa asked, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. Marcus nodded, stepping out into the storm. "Let's find out what this thing is hiding." The fortress loomed ahead, its massive gates etched with the same symbols as the sword. Marcus and Tessa exchanged a glance, then pushed the gates open together. The air inside was thick with the weight of history, and the faint hum of ancient machinery echoed through the halls. "This place is alive," Tessa whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. As they ventured deeper, Marcus felt the pull of the sword grow stronger, guiding him toward a central chamber. The walls were lined with intricate carvings depicting humans wielding weapons of incredible power, battling shadowy figures that seemed to ooze darkness. At the chamber's center stood a pedestal, its surface marked with the same glowing symbols as the sword. Marcus approached, the sword in his hand thrumming with energy. He placed the blade on the pedestal, and the entire room came alive. Lights flared to life, and a deep, resonant voice echoed around them. "Welcome, heir of the Forgotten Empire," the voice said. "The time has come to reclaim what was lost." Marcus and Tessa exchanged a stunned look as the room began to shift, revealing a holographic map of the galaxy. Marked across it were dozens of locations, each one glowing with the same blue light as the sword. "This just got a whole lot bigger," Tessa said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus stared at the map, the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. "And we've only just begun," he said. The holographic map rotated in the air before them, its shimmering blue light casting ethereal shadows across the ancient chamber. The galaxy it depicted was both familiar and alien, marked with dozens of glowing points, each one pulsating in sync with the sword in Marcus's hand. Tessa's sharp eyes darted across the map as she traced her finger over the projections. "These locations, they're scattered across the entire galaxy. planets, moons, even derelict stations. Whatever this is, it's bigger than either of us. Marcus remained silent, staring at the pulsing points on the map. Each one felt like a thread, pulling at the edges of his mind, whispering to him in fragments he couldn't yet piece together. The sword, resting against the pedestal, hummed faintly, as if urging him to act. "What's the voice talking about?" Tessa asked, pacing beside him. "Heir of the Forgotten Empire? You sure you're not some secret royal?" Marcus snorted, his lips curving into a faint smile. "Pretty sure my family history's nothing but farmers and mechanics. If there's an empire involved, it's news to me." The disembodied voice spoke again, deep and resonant, sending shivers down their spines. The Forgotten Empire thrived before the first stars were born. Its heart was humanity, its strength unity. The sword you wield is a fragment of that power, one of the keys to awakening what has long been dormant. Tessa stopped pacing, her gaze fixed on Marcus. Dormant? Awakening? She crossed her arms, her voice laced with concern. "This is starting to sound like a story where a lot of people end up dead." "Relax," Marcus said, though his grip on the sword tightened. "We don't even know what awakening means." As if in response, the voice continued. "The galaxy stands on the precipice of shadow. The darkness that once sought to consume the stars stirs again. Only the heirs of the Empire can oppose it. To do so, you must reclaim the lost keys and restore the Forge of Eternity." "Forge of Eternity?" Tessa echoed, her eyebrows arching. "Let me guess, more cryptic ancient nonsense?" But Marcus wasn't listening. His gaze was locked on the holographic map, his mind swirling with fragments of the visions he'd experienced. He saw fleets of starships battling against creatures of pure shadow. He saw ancient cities collapsing under waves of darkness. He saw humans, armed with weapons like his sword, fighting back. The map began to shift again, zooming in on one glowing point in the Crimson Sector. A deep ravine on a desolate moon appeared, its coordinates hovering in the air. "The first key lies within," the voice said. "Proceed with haste." The shadows move faster than you know. The map flickered, then faded, leaving the chamber bathed in silence and dim blue light. Tessa let out a slow breath. "So, not to state the obvious, but this is way out of my comfort zone. Shadow monsters? Ancient empires? Galaxy-saving quests? That's not exactly in my contract." Marcus turned to her, the weight of the sword and the revelations pressing on him. "You're welcome to walk away. I wouldn't blame you." Tessa stared at him, her piercing golden eyes narrowing. "Walk away? And miss out on watching you bumble your way through saving the galaxy? Not a chance." He smiled faintly. "You're really something, Tessa. Yeah. Let's get moving before I change my mind." She strode toward the chamber's exit, her steps echoing against the ancient stone. The moon of shadows. Tessa's ship sliced through the swirling chaos of the Crimson Sector, weaving through plasma storms and debris fields with precision. The coordinates from the map led them to a barren moon orbiting a dying star. The surface was a wasteland of jagged rocks and deep chasms, illuminated by the faint red glow of the distant sun. Lightning arced across the darkened sky, and the air shimmered with residual energy from ancient battles. As they landed, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The sword in his hand pulsed faintly, its glow dimming and brightening in a steady rhythm. "This place gives me the creeps," Tessa said, stepping out of the ship and scanning the surroundings with her rifle. "Feels like something's lurking just out of sight." "Let's hope it stays out of sight," Marcus muttered, gripping the sword tightly as they moved toward the ravine marked on the map. The descent was treacherous, the narrow path winding between jagged cliffs and loose rocks. The deeper they went, the darker it became, until the only light came from the sword's faint glow. At the bottom of the ravine, they found a massive doorway carved into the rock. The symbols on its surface glowed faintly, matching the ones on the sword. "Another ancient lock," Tessa said, eyeing the doorway. "You think your magic sword's the key?" "Only one way to find out," Marcus said, stepping forward. As he raised the sword, the symbols on the door flared to life. A low rumble echoed through the ravine as the doorway split open, revealing a dark tunnel lined with glowing crystals. Marcus and Tessa exchanged a glance before stepping inside. The air was thick with the weight of time, and the walls seemed to hum faintly as they moved deeper into the tunnel. At its end, they found a massive chamber filled with towering statues of humanoid figures, each holding a weapon similar to Marcus's sword. In the center of the chamber was a pedestal, and resting on it was a small, intricately carved orb. Its surface shimmered with the same blue light as the sword. "This must be it," Marcus said, approaching the pedestal. Tessa hung back, her rifle at the ready. "Careful. Ancient traps tend to be a thing in places like this." As Marcus reached for the orb, the ground beneath them trembled. The statues began to move, their eyes glowing red as they stepped down from their pedestals. "Called it," Tessa said, raising her rifle. Marcus grabbed the orb, and the statues froze mid-step. The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of the sword and the orb. The pedestal emitted a beam of light, projecting another holographic map. This time, it showed a different part of the galaxy, a cluster of systems in uncharted space. "The second key lies here," the disembodied voice said. "But beware, the shadows have already begun to stir." The statues remained motionless as Marcus and Tessa backed toward the exit. "Let's get out of here," Tessa said, her voice tight. Marcus nodded, clutching the orb tightly as they retraced their steps to the surface. As they emerged from the ravine, Marcus glanced back at the darkened entrance. He could feel the weight of the journey ahead pressing on him, but he also felt a spark of determination. Whatever the shadows were, whatever the forgotten empire had left behind, he was ready to face it. And he knew he wouldn't have to do it alone. Want to see what happens when the shadows catch up to them? The orb rested on the ship's console, glowing faintly as Marcus and Tessa studied the holographic map it projected. The cluster of systems highlighted by the orb pulsed slowly, as though calling to them, urging them forward. "Uncharted space," Tessa muttered, leaning back in the pilot's chair. "Pirates, radiation storms, shadowy ancient horrors. Sounds like a lovely vacation spot." Marcus stood behind her, the sword strapped to his back, its glow dimming and brightening like a living thing. "You're sure you're up for this?" Tessa turned her head, her golden eyes locking onto his. "Are you?" "Because this isn't just another artifact hunt anymore, Marcus. This is something bigger, and probably deadlier." He smirked, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I've come this far. Not stopping now." The moment was interrupted by the ship's alarms. The console lit up, and Tessa spun around, her hands flying across the controls. "What is it?" Marcus asked, gripping the back of her chair. "Ships," she said grimly. "No, 3 of them. They're closing in fast." She tapped a few keys, bringing up an image on the screen. The vessels were sleek and angular, painted in matte black with crimson insignias emblazoned on their hulls. "Heritage Foundation enforcement ships," she said. "They must have tracked the energy surge from the orb." "Damn it." Marcus felt the sword pulse against his back, as if responding to the approaching threat. "Can we outrun them?" Tessa's lips curved into a mischievous grin. "They got firepower, but I've got speed. Hold on." She pushed the throttle, and the ship shot forward, its engines roaring as it plunged into the swirling chaos of the Crimson Sector. Plasma storms raged around them, fiery tendrils of energy licking at the hull. The pursuing ships followed, their weapons lighting up the void with bursts of crimson energy. Tessa swerved and weaved through the storms, her movements precise and calculated. "Think you could give them a little distraction?" she called over her shoulder. Marcus hesitated, then unstrapped the sword. He held it in both hands, feeling its energy surge as he concentrated. The blade responded, emitting a blinding flash of light that shot out into the storm. The pursuing ships faltered, their sensors momentarily overloaded by the surge. "Nice trick," Tessa said, her tone impressed. "But they're not giving up." As if to prove her point, the nearest ship fired a torpedo, its glowing red trail cutting through the storm. Tessa banked hard, narrowly avoiding the explosion, but the shockwave rattled the ship. "Shields are taking a hit," she muttered. "I can't keep this up forever." Marcus clenched his jaw, looking back at the glowing orb on the console. An idea formed, risky but better than nothing. "What if we use the orb?" he asked. Tessa gave him a sharp look. "You want to activate the mysterious ancient artifact while we're being shot at? Are you insane?" "It's connected to the sword," he said, gripping the blade tighter. "And the sword seems to know what it's doing. Maybe it can—" Before he could finish, another torpedo streaked toward them. This one was too close. Tessa swerved, but the explosion sent the ship spiraling. Warning lights flashed across the console as Tessa fought to regain control. "We're not going to make it," she shouted. Marcus didn't hesitate. He grabbed the orb and held it close to the sword. The two artifacts pulsed in unison, their light growing brighter until it filled the cockpit. The ship shuddered violently, and for a moment, everything was blindingly white. When the light faded, Marcus and Tessa found themselves in the void of space, surrounded by eerie calm. The storms of the Crimson Sector were gone, replaced by the faint glow of distant stars. "What just happened?" Tessa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus stared at the sword and orb, both now dim and inert. "I think they moved us like a teleport." Tessa's fingers danced across the controls. "We're in the system the orb showed us. We're light years from the Crimson Sector." She looked up at him, her expression a mix of awe and disbelief. "Okay, I'm officially impressed." And terrified. Before Marcus could respond, the ship's sensors lit up again. This time, the readings weren't ships. They were energy signatures, massive and unfamiliar. Tessa brought up the display, and both of them stared at the screen. Ahead of them was a massive structure, floating in the void like a forgotten relic. It was a station, but unlike anything they'd ever seen. Its design was angular and intricate, its surface covered in the same glowing symbols as the sword. "It's beautiful," Tessa murmured, her voice tinged with wonder. "And ancient," Marcus said, feeling the sword pulse faintly again. This must be what the map was leading us to. As they approached, the station seemed to come alive. Lights flickered across its surface, and a low hum resonated through the ship. Tessa's hands tightened on the controls. "I don't like this. It feels alive." Marcus stepped closer to the console, his eyes fixed on the station. "It's waiting for us?" Tessa glanced at him, her expression wary. "You sure about that?" "No," he admitted. "But we didn't come this far to turn back now." With a reluctant sigh, Tessa guided the ship toward a docking port that had opened on the station's surface. The interior was bathed in a soft blue glow, the walls adorned with more of the strange symbols. As they stepped out of the ship, Marcus felt a wave of energy wash over him. The sword glowed brighter, and the symbols on the walls shifted, forming patterns that seemed to beckon him forward. "This place is reacting to you," Tessa said, her voice hushed. Marcus nodded, his grip tightening on the sword. "Let's find out why." They moved deeper into the station, the air growing heavier with each step. The symbols on the walls pulsed in time with the sword, leading them to a massive chamber at the station's core. In the center of the chamber was a pedestal, similar to the one they'd found on the moon. But this one held not an orb, but a massive crystalline shard, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly light. As Marcus approached, the shard began to glow, and a deep, resonant voice filled the chamber. "You have found the second key, but the shadows have found you as well." The room darkened, and Marcus and Tessa spun around to see dark shapes materializing in the corners. They were humanoid, but their bodies seemed to be made of swirling black smoke, their glowing red eyes fixed on the pair. "Guess the shadows didn't take long to catch up," Tessa said, raising her rifle. Marcus raised the sword, its light flaring brighter than ever. "Then let's show them what happens when they mess with the Forgotten Empire." The chamber filled with a low, resonating hum as the shadow creatures advanced, their smoky forms flickering in and out of focus like living nightmares. Their glowing red eyes burned with malice, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop with every step they took. Marcus held the glowing sword in front of him, its pulsing light steady and defiant. The energy radiating from it seemed to push back against the encroaching darkness, forming a faint barrier of blue light around him and Tessa. "Stay behind me," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside him. Tessa raised her rifle, her golden eyes sharp. "Not a chance, hero. You swing your magic sword. I'll cover your back." She fired a shot at one of the creatures, the plasma bolt passing harmlessly through its insubstantial form. The creature let out a guttural hiss, then surged forward. "Plasma doesn't work on these things," Tessa shouted, stepping back. "I'll handle it," Marcus replied, gripping the sword tighter. The blade responded to his determination, glowing brighter as arcs of energy danced along its edge. The first shadow lunged, its claws raking through the air. Marcus swung the sword in a wide arc, the blade cutting through the creature like a knife through smoke. It let out a piercing shriek and dissolved into nothingness. The others hesitated, as if gauging their prey. The sword's glow intensified, casting long shadows on the walls and illuminating the intricate patterns etched into the chamber. The symbols on the walls seemed to shift and shimmer, resonating with the energy of the blade. "They're afraid of it," Marcus realized, taking a step forward. "Good," Tessa said, switching her rifle for a small energy baton. "Let's make them more afraid." As if spurred by her defiance, the shadows surged forward as one, a writhing mass of darkness and claws. Marcus met them head-on, the sword's light cutting through the creatures with each swing. Blue arcs of energy exploded with every strike, scattering the shadows like smoke in the wind. Tessa moved with practiced precision, her baton crackling with electricity as she dodged and struck, forcing the creatures back when they tried to flank Marcus. "You'd think ancient shadow monsters would be a little less squishy," she quipped, ducking under a swipe from one of the creatures. "They're not squishy," Marcus grunted, swinging the sword again. "They're just stupid enough to keep attacking." The battle raged, the chamber filled with the sounds of shrieking shadows, crackling energy, and Marcus and Tessa's labored breaths. Despite their efforts, the shadows kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. "We can't keep this up forever," Tessa called, backing up toward the pedestal. "Any bright ideas, sword guy?" Marcus's eyes flicked to the crystalline shard on the pedestal. Its glow had intensified during the fight, and the symbols on its surface pulsed in rhythm with the sword. He felt a pull toward it, as if the shard was calling to him. "Cover me," he shouted, breaking away from the fight and sprinting toward the pedestal. "Marcus, what are you?" Tessa's protest was cut off as she swung her baton at another shadow, her movements growing more desperate. Marcus reached the pedestal and placed his free hand on the shard. The moment his skin made contact, a surge of energy shot through him, and the chamber was bathed in blinding blue light. The shadows let out deafening shrieks, their forms unraveling as the light consumed them. When the light faded, the chamber was silent. The shadows were gone, leaving only faint wisps of smoke that quickly dissipated. Marcus staggered, his hand still on the shard, and Tessa was at his side in an instant, steadying him. "What the hell was that?" she asked, her voice equal parts awe and frustration. "The shard," Marcus said, his voice hoarse. "It's connected to the sword. Together they—" He was cut off as the shard began to hover above the pedestal, spinning slowly. The symbols on its surface shifted and rearranged, forming a glowing pattern that projected outward. A three-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared, similar to the one the orb had shown, but far more detailed. Tessa stared at the map, her eyes wide. This is incredible. These systems, most of them aren't even on modern star charts." "It's more than that," Marcus said, his gaze fixed on the map. "These are facilities, outposts, cities. An entire network left behind by the Forgotten Empire." The shard's glow dimmed, and the map disappeared, replaced by a single point of light hovering above the pedestal. Marcus reached out instinctively, and the light shot toward him, entering the sword. The blade glowed brighter for a moment, then settled into a steady, quiet hum. "What just happened?" Tessa asked, her voice tinged with unease. "The sword absorbed it," Marcus said, holding the blade in front of him. "The shard was a key, and now the sword's carrying whatever it unlocked." Tessa ran a hand through her hair, her golden eyes narrowing. Okay, so we've got a magic sword, an ancient map, and shadow monsters that want us dead. What's next? Do we just keep following the trail? Before Marcus could answer, the chamber trembled, and a deep, rumbling voice echoed around them. The key has been awakened. The guardians will come. Prepare yourselves, heirs of the forgotten empire. Your journey is only beginning. The voice faded, and the trembling stopped. Marcus and Tessa exchanged a look, both of them trying to process what they'd just heard. Well, Tessa said after a long pause, that's ominous. Marcus managed a faint smile. Could be worse. Tessa raised an eyebrow. Worse than ancient guardians coming after us? He sheathed the sword, its glow dimming to a faint pulse. Worse would be giving up now. Tessa sighed, shaking her head. You're impossible, you know that? Yeah, Marcus said, his grin returning. But you're still here. She rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smile. Come on, hero. Let's get back to the ship before this place throws another surprise at us. As they made their way back to the docking bay, the sword pulsing gently at Marcus's side, he couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was only going to get harder from here. But for the first time, he felt a strange sense of purpose, as if he was finally stepping into a role he'd been born to play. And as Tessa walked beside him, her sharp wit and steady presence grounding him, he knew he wasn't facing it alone. The starship glided silently through the dense, swirling clouds of the Crimson Sector, its hull illuminated by the faint glow of distant nebulas. Inside, Marcus stood at the ship's viewing port, the ancient sword resting on the console beside him. Its glow was dim, almost as if it were waiting, conserving its energy for what lay ahead. Tessa joined him, her arms crossed as she studied the planet that loomed ahead, a massive, storm-racked world where lightning danced across the surface like furious serpents. Are you sure about this? She asked, her voice softer than usual. Marcus nodded. The visions were clear. This is where it all ends. Or begins, Tessa said, her golden eyes flickering with concern. You don't have to do this alone, you know? I know, he said, meeting her gaze. And I'm glad you're here. But if this goes wrong, it won't, Tessa interrupted, placing a hand on his arm. You're not just some guy with a magic sword, Marcus. You've already done the impossible. You'll figure it out? He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Let's hope you're right. The ship descended through the stormy atmosphere, buffeted by violent winds and surging electromagnetic interference. Tessa's fingers danced across the controls, her movements precise and sure. Despite the turbulence, she landed the ship in a wide, desolate valley surrounded by jagged cliffs. The ground was blackened, scorched by centuries of storms, and the air crackled with static. Marcus stepped out of the ship first, the sword in hand. Its glow intensified as he approached the center of the valley, where a massive, circular structure lay half-buried in the ground. The design was unmistakable, another relic of the Forgotten Empire. This is it, he said, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. Tessa joined him, her rifle slung over her shoulder. Looks like a door, she observed, gesturing to the faint outline of a seam in the structure's surface. Any idea how to open it? Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward and raised the sword. The blade responded instantly, glowing brighter as symbols appeared on its surface, matching those etched into the door. A beam of blue light shot from the sword's tip, striking the center of the door. The ground trembled, and the door began to slide open with a deep, rumbling groan. Beyond it was a vast chamber filled with machinery, its purpose long forgotten. At the center of the room stood a pedestal similar to the one they had encountered before, but this one was far larger, and its glow was faint, as if it were dying. This place has been waiting for someone to come back, Marcus murmured, stepping inside. Tessa followed, her movements cautious. Let's just hope it's waiting for us, and not something worse. As they approached the pedestal, Marcus felt the pull of the sword grow stronger. He placed the blade into a slot at the center, and the entire room came alive. Lights flickered on, machines hummed, and the air was filled with the sound of ancient systems booting up. A holographic figure appeared above the pedestal, its form humanoid but indistinct, as if it were a composite of many different species. Its voice was calm and resonant, carrying a weight of authority. "Welcome, heir of the Forgotten Empire," it said. "You have awakened the Nexus. The knowledge and power of your ancestors are now yours to command." Marcus stared at the figure, his mind racing. "What do you mean, heir? I don't even know what this place is." The figure's glowing eyes turned toward him. "You carry the Blade of Dominion, the key to the Nexus. Only one of your lineage could wield it. The Empire fell eons ago, but its legacy lives within you." Tessa glanced at Marcus, her expression unreadable. "So, you're basically space royalty. Great. No pressure. Why now?" Marcus asked, ignoring her. "Why bring all of this back after so long?" "The darkness rises again," the figure said, its tone grim. "The shadows that destroyed the Empire have returned, seeking to consume the galaxy. You are the first in millennia to rise against them. The Nexus will guide you, but the path forward is yours to choose." The room shook violently as the storm outside intensified. Alarms blared, and the hologram flickered. "They are coming," the figure warned. "You must decide. Will you lead, or will you fall?" Marcus gripped the sword tightly, his jaw set. "I'll lead," he said firmly, "but I need to know what to do." "Then take the power of the Nexus," the hologram said, "and fight." A beam of light enveloped Marcus, and the sword pulsed with unimaginable energy. He felt knowledge flood his mind: battle tactics, starship schematics, the locations of hidden outposts and fleets left behind by the Empire. It was overwhelming, but he stood firm, letting the power settle within him. When the light faded, the hologram was gone, and the room was silent. Tessa stepped closer, her eyes wide. "Marcus, your eyes. They're glowing." He turned to her, the sword still in his hand. "It started. The shadows are coming. We have to get back to the ship." As they left the chamber, the ground beneath them shook again, more violently this time. The shadows had arrived. Dark forms emerged from the storm, their red eyes glowing like embers. They surrounded the valley, cutting off any escape. Tessa raised her rifle. "I guess they're not here to negotiate." Marcus stepped forward, the sword blazing with blue light. "No, but I'm not here to run." The shadows surged, and Marcus charged, the sword cutting through the darkness like a beacon. Tessa fought at his side, her precision and skill complementing his raw power. Together, they pushed through the enemy lines, the storm and shadows raging around them. They reached the ship just as the largest shadow creature yet emerged, a towering, serpentine form that blocked their path. Its roar shook the valley, and its claws crackled with dark energy. Marcus raised the sword, its glow brighter than ever. "Go," he shouted to Tessa. "Get the ship ready." "I'm not leaving you," she yelled back, firing at the creature. "You're not," Marcus said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "But I need you to trust me." Tessa hesitated, then nodded and ran to the ship. Marcus turned back to the creature and charged, the sword blazing like a star. Their clash lit up the valley, blue light and darkness colliding in a blinding explosion. For a moment, it seemed as though the storm itself had been torn apart. When the light faded, Marcus stood alone, the sword humming softly in his hand. The shadows were gone, the valley silent once more. Tessa rushed to his side, her face pale with worry. "You did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded, his eyes still glowing faintly. "It's just the beginning." They boarded the ship and took off, leaving the storm-racked world behind. As they broke through the atmosphere, Marcus stared out at the stars, the weight of the Nexus's knowledge heavy on his shoulders. "We have a galaxy to save," he said, more to himself than to Tessa. She leaned back in her seat, a smirk playing on her lips. "Well, hero, I guess I'm sticking around. Someone has to make sure you don't get yourself killed." Marcus chuckled, the first genuine laugh in what felt like ages. "I wouldn't have it any other way." And together, they vanished into the stars, ready to face whatever came next.